A lot of people ask about this guy. He has some legendary stories behind him. We spoke to the twins, and the twins, you know, didn't take nothing away from the fact that the man was a iller and an ill unaliver, but he wasn't a boss. He was sent to do work, and people glorify him like he's a boss. And again, the people that are into the cartel situation, they tend to pick and choose, and I'm here to shine the light on everybody. It is what it is. Tell a friend to tell a friend we are here.
On the 18th of October 2013, this happened. Can you see it? Him, the clown. In the next few seconds, this clown would assassinate Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, the leader of the notorious Tijuana Cartel and one of Mexico's most dangerous men at the time, in front of everyone present at his 63rd birthday party. Today,
That's a big job right there. You know what I'm saying? I'd be interested in seeing if there's a video we could find where they talk about basically how he pulled it off, because that's a big one right there. You in the party, you the clown, you in a clown suit, and it goes down like that. And he wasn't just going after, from my understanding, some nothing. He was going after a boss. So, you know.
hey, we know the clown assassin was Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, Sinaloa Cartel's highest-ranking hitman, better known as El Chino Antrax. And today, I'll be telling you his story. Shady beginnings. Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa had a surprisingly normal and privileged upbringing. He was born on the 15th of June in the city of Culiacan, the very heart of the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. His family were well respected and somewhat affluent. His father was a government official and his mother was an academic. However, there was a problem right from the very beginning, and it had...
All right, so that just lets you know that in some cases, in a lot of cases, I believe in La Barbie's case too, these guys are not poverty cases. These guys are not in the game because they need to eat. These guys are in the game because the game called to them and they was greedy and bloodthirsty. That's a difference than the kid that's getting 8 pesos to carry a hammer and go to war with these guys that and to be left to these guys like that kid that we watched the video about the other day. There was a kid that got caught by the opposition. The opposition asked him how he got caught. He said, my guy told me to run ahead of him. I ran ahead of him. He shot me in the legs and he left me there. Right? That kid was getting paid. He was offered 12 pesos. I don't know how, you know, if it's a day, a week, or whatever. And when he got there, it went down to 8. That's not the case for a Chino Antrax. That's not the case for a La Barbie. These guys come from affluent families and money and education. You know what I mean?
and his mother was an academic. Though well respected and somewhat affluent, his father was a government official and his mother was an academic. However, there was a problem right from the very beginning, and it had everything to do with Arechiga's neighbors. You see, the family that lived next door to Arechiga through his childhood were the Zambadas, and if you aren't familiar with that name, I'll break it down for you in a few seconds. Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia was part of the 4 people who founded the Sinaloa Cartel.
So that's an easy come up, right? When the neighbor is the man. Mayo been in the game a long time. Now think about that too. Not only did they say, oh, Chino Antrax, comes from an affluent family, and El Mayo's his neighbor, but Chino Antrax's father is a government official. So that means a government official was Mayo's neighbor too. Just goes to show you how close, if not separate at all, how thin the line is between government and cartel in Mexico. It's the same thing. One and the same.
25 years ago, in 1987, when El Chapo was still active, Zambada led his own faction. The only reason you don't hear much about him was because, unlike El Chapo, who enjoyed courting the spotlight, Zambada had always been content with being the equally ruthless, equally cunning, shadowy figure. Now, back to Arechiga's story.
Which is again another reason Jay says that he's still alive and free, and that he'll die a free man. Because he's smart and he's quiet. Very rare does he pop his head out for any reason, or has he even over the years for any reason. Very hard to find pictures of him. You'll hear stories and instances, but you ain't finding many pictures or video. And then they say when he did do the interview with a very well-known, decorated reporter in Mexico, they say he did that to send a message to his son who was in an American prison. So, very smart, cunning man. Again, not to be glorified, because from my understanding, he was into underage girls too. So, he got no place on my t-shirt.
Mayo Zambada had 3 sons, Vicente Zambada Niebla, Ismael Zambada Imperial, and Serafin Zambada Ortiz. Those 3 sons were around the same age with Arashiga, and being his neighbors, he grew up with them. Many years later, in a courtroom, Arashiga's mum would say this about her son's relationship with the Zambadas. They went to school together, they played together, they participated in sports together, they attended social events together, they grew to be best friends. No one knows how much influence the Zambada boys had over
So them boys met in Little League. Huh? Neighbors.
Arashiga, but you must know that Zambada did not shield his sons from his cartel business. It was a family business. However, as Arashiga grew older, he didn't show any indication that he would live a life of crime. He tried to be a pilot in the Mexican military, but failed the physical exam because he had a skin condition called psoriasis. So, Arashiga shifted his focus to other things. More specifically, he decided to pursue a degree in architecture in college. During his time in college, 2 life-changing events happened to him in rather quick succession.
All right, so this guy he seems like he has some legitimate ambition in his life. Legitimate ambition in the sense that he even shot for a chance to go to the Air Force, and also that he was in college and that he attempted to be an architect. Those sound like very noble ambitions to have for him to turn into what he turned into. That's bananas, all right?
1. He had a daughter, and 2. He got married. These new responsibilities forced him to drop out of school, and this is when things take a dramatic turn for the worse. A new chapter.
Okay, so that was his trauma. His trauma was that he had a shorty and a wife. Hit the like button, y'all. He had a shorty and a wife. That's the trauma. That's what turned him into, the Joker.
As a father, husband, and provider proved to be incredibly difficult for Arashiga, and when it became unbearable, he turned to his childhood friends, the Zambada brothers, for help. One of the brothers, Vicente Zambada, also known as El Vicentilo, chose to help Arashiga the only way he could, by introducing him to cartel business. Arashiga was first tasked with small and harmless errands, like driving shipments and supervising goods to their destinations. And when he did these tasks perfectly, El Vicentilo introduced him to the drug trade. It was during this time that Arashiga's creativity entered the spotlight. He came up with an ingenious method of getting shipments of cocaine and marijuana across the border without getting caught. His plan involved creating a network of legitimate businesses that required shipments to America from Mexico. Then, he would set up several legitimate trucking companies that delivered those shipments. This way, he could legally get the trucks across because they had the proper paperwork, and the Border Patrol would have no idea that tons and tons of drugs were hidden in each truck. In no time, Arashiga became a big-time player within the Sinaloa Cartel and caught the attention of El Vicentilo's father, the senior Zambada, El Mayo, who began to take a liking to him. Somewhere, sometime around this point, something snapped within Arashiga, or maybe it had always been there, because this was when he began to exhibit an unquenchable thirst for blood. He voluntarily engaged in the more grisly parts of the cartel.
All right, that's in him. I'm not watching the story of a person whose trauma, who lost so many people, best friend got unalive, this or that, and that turned him to the dark side. Nah, I see a little discomfort, Got a wife and a kid now, a little discomfort, Come up, never needed nothing. Now he got to go make it on his own. A little bit of discomfort, send him over there. He goes over there, does a couple of things, and turns into the Joker. Like, I'm not hearing some traumatic story. That's just a dude that figured out that he was a sociopath.
Trade. More than anyone else in the cartel at that point, Arashiga was willing to murder people. However, thirst for blood. He voluntarily engaged in the more grisly parts of the cartel trade. More than anyone else in the cartel at that point, Arashiga was willing to murder people. However, it was the things he did with the bodies of the people that he killed that turned him into a notoriously feared urban legend. Mutilated bodies like cautionary banners and grisly ribbons were hung up on public bridges within Sinaloan territory. And
so is that his calling card? Was that not a thing before that? The stringing up of the ops from the bridge with the signs. Did he bring that to the game? We like to ask those questions. Or I like to ask those questions here. Just like when we got into the Güero Palma story, they went after his family. Was that when it became okay in the game to start going after people's families? Because if you know now what the cartel's like, that's a common thread in the cartel is, you and your family can get it. Everybody can get it.
The rumor in town was that anyone who died at the hands of Arechiga continued their suffering in the afterlife because of what was done to their body. Unsurprisingly, El Mayo capitalized on Arechiga's flair for violence and added him to his retinue of feared assassins. And more importantly, he was made the personal bodyguard of El Vicentilo, Los Antrax. Sometime around 2008, Arechiga was removed from bodyguard duties and given a new, arguably more important assignment by El Mayo. There was a civil war brewing within the Sinaloa Cartel. An ally of the Sinaloa Cartel had broken off and was waging war. They were the Beltran Leyva organization, and while their fight was with El Chapo, El Mayo was caught in the middle of it and had to join the war. The situation was the perfect storm for Arechiga. He formed his own armed squadron of the Sinaloa Cartel and named it Los Antrax, after the infamous deadly bacteria. Members of his team included his right-hand man, René Velázquez Valenzuela, aka El Sargento Phoenix, Jesus Peña, also known as El 20, Rafael Guadalupe Felix Núñez, also known as Changuito Antrax, amongst others. And every member was given a ring. As the head of this hit squad, Arechiga would come to be known as El Chino Antrax, which translated to the Chinese anthrax. They had two jobs. One was the
Yeah, they blocking out the faces on these pictures, but these dudes took these pictures like this is some clout shit. You know what I'm saying? It's not good enough that you got an army, a bunch of armed up dudes and some bread and some backup. It's not good enough. You gotta take pictures to feel it even more. Like, this is crazy to me. If those are real pictures of them, you know, living out their music video dreams.
Which translated to the Chinese anthrax. They had two jobs. One was the protection of El Mayo Zambada, and the second was war on anyone who dared to cross their paths. For Arechiga and his hit squad, that was practically anybody. Los Antrax wreaked havoc on Sinaloa over a 5-year period of unending violence, and Arechiga turned into an unrecognizable monster. Every time they clashed with a
Now, I will say this, there's kids that in that trauma, right? In the trauma of those wars happening, right? We talked about how I didn't find the trauma in just what they told us of Chino's story here. But there's kids that were in the midst of that war, that watched that war happen, that lost people, lost uncles, fathers, mothers, sisters, whatever in those wars. Now, there's kids like that ended up with them hammers in their hands, that came up from that, and that was the moment that changed them into, you know, what they are today, running around with big guns.
Beltran Leyva, it was a bloodbath, with casualties on both sides, including civilians. Meanwhile, the Mexican army joined the party and tried to take both factions down. After a while, rival cartel members got fed up, and they began taking out members of the Los Antrax.
It's like an album cover and shit. They got logo, like an album cover.
Even the Mexican military joined the party. Meanwhile, Arechiga began to take an unhealthy liking to the spotlight. As Arechiga's gang suffered hit after hit, his leadership began to look shaky in the eyes of El Mayo. On the 1st of November 2011, Los Antrax suffered one of its biggest blows when a fellow leader of the squad, Francisco Archirubio, whom everyone knew as Pancho, was killed during an indoor soccer game in Culiacan by rival gangsters of Los Mazatlecos. The enforcer
Can't even go to the soccer game, man. Soccer game ain't even safe. Shit.
Arm of the Beltran Leyva organization. The reprisal violence that followed shook different cities in Sinaloa for months to come. Bodies hung from the bridges, civilians shot dead on playgrounds. There was violence everywhere.
Civilians shot dead on playgrounds. Like, a gang do that in Chicago, I don't condone it. Many a filthy motherfucker done that in Chicago. You know, some kid gets hit in the middle of some shit that kid ain't got nothing to do with. Over here, times 1,000. I mean, not in Chicago, I'm talking about there. Times 1,000.
Everywhere. Meanwhile, as Arechiga took out revenge on his enemies, he also picked up another questionable hobby: social media influencer. As crazy as it sounds,
wilding the out. If you live in it, however you live in it, and you want to be a social media influencer. Crazy.
And frankly, it shouldn't. Arechiga flaunted his wealth on social media and effectively became a social media influencer. He made millions of dollars from the cartel and, unsurprisingly, spent those millions on flashy cars, rented out expensive yachts, bought expensive watches and houses. Arechiga also had several narco corrido ballads written about him, some of which described him as an elegant and fit man who narco corrido bought expensive watches and houses.
Super clout, man. Super clout.
Arechiga also had several narco corrido ballads written about him, some of which described him as an elegant and fit man who enjoyed his sports cars, yachts, and drinking champagne. And he posted everything on social media, flaunting his wealth for the world to see. He even posed with famous celebrities like this one with Paris Hilton.
Yeah, I don't get it. The clout of being in a room with some dumb blonde from a rich family is enough to put your face out there like that? I don't know, man. It's just weird.
Even posed with famous celebrities like this one.
It lends to an emptiness. There's something missing in these dudes. I don't need no picture with Paris Hilton. If I'm out there making big money, I got his squads.
With Paris Hilton.
It lends to an emptiness in these dudes. It lends to an insecurity. Something that they don't get from anything they do. They still need it. The attention.
While he might have blurred out his face to hide his identity, security agencies all over the world began to pick up on his tail, and it didn't take them long to figure out a way to catch him. You see, while Arechiga might have made efforts to hide his identity, his signature Los Antrax ring was on his finger in every picture. He never took it off, and this slip-up would ultimately lead to his downfall in the final months of 2013.
He's wilding out. He tweaked.
Arrest, jail, snitch.
Oh no! Arrest, jail, and the word that shall not be uttered. The pick and choose word of the century.
On the 31st of December, just months after assassinating the head of the Tijuana Cartel, Arechiga decided to take a vacation. He left Mexico for the Netherlands, and immediately upon landing, he was arrested by members of the Dutch police. Some days before then, the US had alerted the Dutch that a 33-year-old Mexican citizen, who also happened to be a drug lord, would be arriving in their country in a few days, and they wanted him to be arrested. So, immediately after...
These dudes was globetrotting. That's one thing they were doing. They were going everywhere but America. Well, they was even in America too. But they was everywhere. They was traveling.
Arechiga landed, they identified him and took him in. However, the identification process wasn't easy because Arechiga was flying under a false identity.
And here's the thing, when everybody in the comments likes asking about, yo, why don't they just run? Why didn't they just run? Why didn't they just run? And they had the money to just run. Well, man, it's facial recognition. It's all kind of shit going on.
Citizen, who also happened to be a drug lord, would be arriving in their country in a few days, and they wanted him to be arrested. So, immediately after Arechiga landed, they identified him and took him in. However, the identification process wasn't easy because Arechiga was flying under a false identity, the identity of a dead man, probably one that he killed. He had also grown a beard and slightly altered his face with plastic surgery. What helped the authorities to identify him was his Los Antrax ring, which he had foolishly kept on his finger.
Gotta be the shoes. I want to see how they defend this in the comments. Because again, some people pick and choose. They'll say all kind of shit about the twins, and then they'll ask about this guy, and it's like, but didn't this dude do the same thing? If not crazier? Like, dude got mad bodies.
He altered his face with plastic surgery.
That's crazy. That's a crazy length to go to, that plastic surgery shit. But I guess desperation is desperation. You gotta get out. You gotta get out.
Helped the authorities to identify him was his Los Antrax ring, which he had foolishly kept on his finger. Extradition and trial in the US. On the 10th of July 2014, Arechiga was extradited to the US. The next day, he was arraigned and formally charged for drug charges. At first, Arechiga was stubborn and pleaded not guilty to the drug charges against him. But after several hearings, Arechiga did a 360. On the 20th of March 2015, he pled guilty and admitted that he had been involved in cocaine and marijuana shipment into the US and had facilitated violent activities while working for the Sinaloa Cartel. This change
pleaded guilty on the 20th of March 2015 and admitted that he had participated in cocaine and MJ shipments from Mexico to the US and that he had facilitated violent activities for the Sinaloa Cartel. Abby said I was just about to make a comment about how cooperation influencers are going to be a thing soon. With all due respect, dog, there's so much crazy shit happening in this country and in that country that it's bananas.
The US and had facilitated violent activities while working for the Sinaloa Cartel. This change of heart was suspicious, and there were a lot of questions at the time. Was he tortured? Why was he suddenly confessing? What offer could the prosecutors have given him that he couldn't refuse? And there were a lot of questions at the time. Was he tortured? Why was he suddenly confessing? What offer could the prosecutors have given him that he couldn't refuse? At the end of his trial, that offer became quite clear when he was given an incredibly light sentence of just 6 years in a US prison and an extra 5 years of probation. During the 6 years, El Chino Antrax snitched on almost everyone.
I hope the commenters heard that. You know what I'm saying? He snitched on almost everyone. That's the word. That's what they say right here.
collaborating with the US Attorney's Office, giving names, addresses, and exposing forms of operation of the Sinaloa Cartel in the US.
So that's not snitching? What am I missing here? I need the commenters, not the people in the chat. The people in the chat seem to understand. I need the commenters to chime in and let me know what the difference is between one dude snitching and somebody else snitching.
The intel that he shared was so useful that it went a long way in destabilizing major parts of the Sinaloa Cartel. Meanwhile, everyone at home, including El Mayo, were fully aware that their golden boy had turned into a rat. The ultimate end. On the 3rd of March 2020, Arechiga was released on parole and placed under house arrest in the US for obvious reasons. The terms of his parole limited him to a radius of 500 meters from his house in California. However, a few months after, in May, he escaped his parole and returned to Culiacan to live with his sister and her husband.
Why?
Surprisingly, 10 days later, on the night of May 14th, 2020, Arechiga, his sister, and her husband were in the house when all of a sudden, masked gunmen invaded the property and began shooting at them. Arechiga responded with gunfire, but he eventually ran out of ammo and they were all taken hostage. The following morning, the body of Arechiga, along with his sister and her husband, were discovered in a black SUV, wrapped in cloth with their head.
So he damned his whole family, like, you know what I'm saying? He went back over there and everybody got smoked. Like, what? Why? What was the point of that?
Heads covered in plastic bags. They had all been tortured and shot dead. There was a lot of speculation about who could have ordered this attack on El Chino. Some say it was probably members of the Tijuana Cartel taking revenge on him for his assassination of their boss. Others point fingers at remnant members of the Beltran Leyva.
Well, again, at that point, when you're a dude like that and you got so many enemies, it could have been anybody.
Organization that had already been disbanded by the Mexican military. However, and whoever it was, the attack happened deep in Sinaloa territory, and there is no way anyone could have launched such an attack without El Mayo or the senior members of the cartel knowing. And in the months after the attack, when there were no reprisals, reaction, or revenge for the assassination of one of their former top sicarios, it became clear El Mayo must have been the one who ordered the killing, and if he didn't, he definitely allowed it. To them, El Chino Antrax was a traitor who had sold them out, and in any world, business or crime, that is unforgivable.
But they don't consider themselves traitors when they damn somebody else because it's used as a tool.
Why did Arechiga leave the safety of his probation in the US to return to Sinaloa, where he should have known he wasn't wanted? Did he really think everything he had done would be so easily forgiven? Who assured his safety upon his return? Or was El Chino Antrax just that dumb?
When you put it that way, anything's possible. You could be a great unaliver, doesn't mean you got the sense God gave a mule. It could be anything. What do y'all think? All right? Why do you guys think that there's a picking and choosing situation? Why do you think that the twins, I don't know if you guys that be in the chat, I don't know if y'all be in the comments, but why do they get such vitriol and that kind of energy and people ask about these guys in some glorified manner with all of these bodies, with all of these cooperations and all of these missions under their belt, all these betrayals under their belt, and they don't catch the same energy, and people still make songs about it. I just don't understand it. It don't make sense to me. Everybody in the same boat at that point.